Escape to the Metaverse. Better act like you know. Yeah. You are now tuned into the Matthew Rizzle show. Yeah. Escape to the Metaverse. Better act like you know. Yeah. You are now tuned into the Matthew Rizzle show. Yeah. Escape to the Metaverse. Better act like you know. You are now tuned into the Matthew Rizzle show. Yeah. Escape to the Metaverse. Better act like you know. You are now tuned into the Matthew Rizzle show. Yeah.
Hey everyone, before we begin this week's episode of the Matthew and Rizzle Show, just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Proof of Beauty. Proof of Beauty is an experimental digital experience studio. The blockchain is their canvas and the tokens are their brush. You can learn more about Proof of Beauty by checking out pob.studio. You can follow them on Twitter as well at PRRF Beauty. That's PRRF Beauty on Twitter and pob.studio on their homepage to learn more about their projects like Hash, London, and Publico. Thank you and enjoy the show.
Here we are, the incinerator room.
Thank you, Robot Lady. Okay, Esther, really excited to have you on the Matthew and Rizzle Show. Thank you for taking the time to chat with us about Hundo, your project, and really excited to get into all of the good things.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So to get started, really would love to know a little bit about your background, what you were doing prior to coming into the crypto and Web3 space. So kicking things off there would probably be a great way to get this conversation started.
Yeah. So I've spent the last couple of decades, sadly, it shows my age, looking at causes and consequences of youth poverty, youth unemployment, and why young people are perpetually facing sort of the worst excesses of things that happen, that they have no control over, cost of living, inflation, and a lack of coherent pathways from education into employment and the future of work. And so obviously when I started to obsess about Web3, my understanding of it, and trying to learn more about it, I started to see the possibility of a viable alternative economic system that could actually, for the first time, get a digital native generation ahead of the curve, so that they're not behind in the way that they are now in a systemic and structural way.
Sorry, Esther, I didn't realize I was on mute there. I remember
it did go quiet, and I was like, "Oh!"
Yeah, just ghosted you after like that explanation.
I was like, "Bro, come on."
I mean, you've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah. Don't worry, I'm pregnant pause, just trying to see what else comes out. I remember you talking about this like very vividly at NFT Crossroads when we met, and being like very inspired by just sort of the approach you're taking with Web3, because I feel like, as someone like myself, I have like, a history of working within like social work and nonprofit organizations. And I feel like, there's a tremendous opportunity within Web3 and crypto that a lot of people are overlooking, just in terms of the potential to extend opportunities to people, with this technology that have, historically been, disenfranchised, like you're saying. So, I would love to hear, like, how you sort of got to this overlap, or like where the spark came from, and just sort of the lay of the land, because I really feel like not a lot of people are thinking in this direction. So if you could just speak like overall about like who else is sort of playing in this territory, would love to hear a lot about it.
Yeah, so I think my sort of entry, into this world was around about kind of 2017. I was like, okay, blockchain, I'm really trying to get my head as a non-technical person. I feel like this is like a really important thing that's happening. And I'm trying to get my head around it, trying to understand it, sort of was watching crypto with interest, in terms of I was interested to see, when kind of nascent, sort of things happen, where they go. So that was sort of like, I wasn't actively involved. I was really just trying to, just an observer, I suppose. And then it was, so it's never, I suppose it's never really one thing, is it? It's sort of, it was a series of things, and that's kind of where it started. And then I was asked to work on a development program for a women's cycling tour. And that was my first foray into it was Oculus Rift at the time, kind of like AR, VR. We were looking at how to give women more confidence getting on the road, because confidence, cost and childcare of all things were sort of barriers to entry, and using AR, VR to sort of, build confidence and skills. So again, there was sort of these touch points, with this technology and the things that were happening. And then the kind of galvanizing factor was actually COVID, because young people lost their jobs at 3 to 5 times the rate of every other age group. And at the same time, in the hiring market, there were employers screaming out for tech talent that simply doesn't exist at the moment, and that's, you can see that in terms of even just the salaries. There's a kind of a fintech company, last year advertising $750,000 salary for a senior DevOps, which obviously is fantastic for the person who gets it, but completely unsustainable for the market. So there was this sort of moment where the social pain point, the pain point for young people, became a business pain point as well. And then it became a market pain point and a kind of a governmental pain point. And so all of a sudden, this perfect storm that, to be obviously very clear, I really wish wasn't the case, actually occurred. And for us, it became about, okay, we know what the issues are. There is something about Web3, there is something about the rampant acceleration of technology and essentially, as I see it, the fundamental ways in which we will live, work, learn and earn over the next century that's happening, and it's happening now. And there's a solution needed really, really fast. So the ability for us to bring to bear all of our expertise in the causes, consequences issues, and our networks, to galvanize around the idea of how quickly can we get young people upskilled for the future of work through Web3, and that was really the birth of Hundo.
So, how does the learning component actually work? Let's say someone comes to Hundo.xyz. Like, what is the user flow? What's the sort of course load that they could expect, and what sort of outcomes are you seeing from folks that are going through the Hundo courses?
Yeah, so obviously we've been in closed beta this year. So we go live on the 9th and 10th of November, and our focus is on three core components. So we partner with educators on one side. So young people are, we start working with young people while they are already in mandatory education, rather than waiting until they leave and then wonder what to do. So they start their learning journey with us while they're still in education. The flow is they will sign up, which is very Web 2 sign up with their email, and create. We partner with Ready Player Me, and they'll create their avatar. The reason that we use avatars is because we won an Innovate UK grant in 2020 to pilot the use of avatars to remove and reduce hiring bias, and it's very, very successful. So we're obviously thrilled to be partnered with Ready Player Me, who've been just a brilliant partner. So young people create their profile, digital identity. And then the 3 areas that we focus on are creator economy. So that means that young people aren't necessarily, wanting or needing to go and work for an employer. They might want to start their own. their own gigs. So whether it's, it doesn't all have to be Web3, it could be TikTok, how to build YouTube channel, how to go from being an artist illustrator, into an NFT artist, into a gallery like Spatial. So that's where we're starting. The biggest education piece at the moment, is people understanding very in basic terms what the words mean. There's so much jargon, and if you're in it and you love it and you live in the rabbit hole like I do, that's great. But when you go out and talk to most people, it's a bit like, I don't understand it. So the biggest thing for us is the first load of education is going like, what are we talking about, and what does this mean for you? So that's kind of the first bit. The creative economy side, like I've said, we're working with a masterclass style. So we're working with like Dodds, who's AR, VR specialist, Kadeen James, who's got a immersive gallery in Spatial, Crystal Lake, who's TikTok influencer. And it's about, bringing to life people who have not gone on a traditional education journey, and have entered this, this world, and their journey, and learning learning the skills that you need to get started. The second part for us is we're looking at where the highest skills demands are. So the first course that people will be able to do, that young people will be able to do on the platform, is community building, community management. It's a great skill because it's not super technical, and again, we're always looking at how do you get a more mainstream audience engaged and using the technology. So we'll launch that. And then obviously, over the next 12, 18 months, we're building with employers skills-based education modules, kind of a liquid learning format, so that young people can actually know that the skills that they are learning on the platform are giving them a far better chance of becoming, of being able to go into work when they leave education. The kind of the key parts for us, why Web3, why we're a Web3 company. Obviously, the use of avatars were built on-chain, layer 2 on Ethereum, so Polygon network, and we are replacing the CV resume with a permanent soul-bound NFT skills wallet, so that you're starting, for us, it's about starting to use the technology in a way that's useful. So you're kind of learning as you go, even just the process of setting up a wallet, what that means. The platform itself is powered by a utility token. And again, the purpose of that means that young people can be rewarded with utility tokens to continue to enroll on courses and continue to advance their essentially lifelong learning. So they'll start as a young person, but they can continue, to learn on the platform. So that's kind of that's the process.
I'm someone like you described who uses tons of jargon and therefore is like so far removed, in normal like Web3 conversations from people entering the space that I don't even do like a lot of onboarding anymore. I almost feel like I'm like too far gone in a lot of ways to sort of start from scratch with people. So, but your platform it sounds like it's set up for that. It sounds like it's trying to pull in like an adjacent crowd and like utilize Web3 in a way that the platform utilizes it, but it doesn't necessarily, you don't need a fundamental understanding of it in order to utilize it or to get accustomed to it and everything. Yeah. So saying all that to say, like, I would be like really curious to hear how the people, I don't know who you would call them, your clientele, your user base, what their impression is of Web3 and the onboarding process, and what their take is on how it fits into this whole model, because it sounds like a lot of this model could, in theory, exist outside of the realm of Web3 and has, in some ways existed outside of the realm of Web3, but you're like, adding a couple nuances that I think are like cool, interesting, and clever, but also I'm in the rabbit hole right there with you. So of course I think that. So yeah, what's been like the general reception?
Yeah, so we've literally had our Gen Z squad, out and about in the UK at the moment, like Leeds Digital Careers Festival, getting people, literally wearing a headset, having conversations with parents. You're absolutely right. For me, why Web3? Because for kids like me, and for we're diverse, kind of female founders like me with non-technical backgrounds, there wasn't really ever a place for people like, me in Web 2. And so I fundamentally believe in sort of an open metaverse. I've seen what has happened to young people in Web 2, without proper protections, without proper regulation. I think a more decentralized, more community-owned space has a power, and we need a more mainstream audience, who at the moment are up against the sort of the kind of the crypto winter, the hacks, rug scam, an NFT is a JPEG. This is what you're up against, and I suppose because I don't come from sort of technology, I find it easier to look at how people are thinking about this, and the biggest thing that's come out of all of our research and being on the ground, being with young people, talking to them all the time, is Web3 it doesn't mean anything. It's like when you turn around and go, have you traded skins on Valorant? Do you play Clash of Clans? Did you watch Travis Scott in Fortnite? And they're like, yes. And you're like, people are already involved, using this space without even really realizing it. And I kind of feel like I feel like Web3 will have succeeded when people don't even really know that it's Web3 anymore. And so I think, for us, it's also about not every young person wants to be a Solidity developer or Rust or whatever it is. The jobs are exponential, digital marketers, project managers. There are, for us, we just looked at them when if Web3 is about, 3% of the market now, we're looking at the next 50 years and going, if this is the direction of travel, if this is the way that we are all going to operate and interoperate together, then we start that education process now. And I would say that it is much less about the deep, the deep Web3, kind of stuff. And actually just most people are a bit scared of it, and they're made to feel stupid about it. And I think that's kind of the real job, is breaking that barrier and going, it is possible for you to be involved in this space. This is how you can get there. And actually, if you've built a server in Minecraft or you've been in Roblox or whatever, you've kind of already been doing it. You just wouldn't necessarily put that on your CV.
And you mentioned crypto winter. We're also at this weird, funky place where COVID is ending or has ended in certain parts of the world. Certain restrictions remain in other parts, and we're almost on the other side. But I'd say we're still not exactly there. I'm curious, from your vantage point, what sort of changes that you're seeing now that you think will be lasting permanent changes compared to before COVID started, in particular, in relation to like the job market and how that's going to proceed heading forward, and how I think you mentioned a little bit how Hundo is trying to position itself there for like the digital economy that's been emerging, especially through COVID. But just curious, like the high level details of what has permanently changed in your eyes because of COVID in particular, and what's happened during COVID?
I'd say it's almost like the awareness and the awakening of the extent of the scale of the problem. So the obviously World Economic Forum stats are, there's 1 billion new tech roles needed by 2030, not from, so they're needed now. and over this, and it's kind of going, that's 1 in 7 people on the planet. And so the biggest change that I've seen is that real awareness. It's kind of going, it doesn't matter how much you throw at recruitment. If the people with the skills you need don't even exist yet, you've got to fundamentally reverse engineer everything that you're doing right now and find a different, find a better way. And that's the biggest change. I suppose it's the I mean, for me, I've been saying this for about 5 years, probably longer if I was being honest, but it's the first time where when you're saying it to, CTOs, CIOs, CFOs, CEOs, all of them, it's kind of going like, they're going, yeah, we've spoken to companies who spend 22 million a year on recruitment and they can't find the people. And I'm like, well, because the people don't exist yet. You're going to have to start upskilling, for the skills that you need and start to get ahead of that curve. I also have seen, we're looking at we're always looking sort of at a global, the global aspect of it. And I think the bigger territories, UAE, Pakistan, places like that, where there are such acute levels of youth unemployment, government is very switched on to the idea that something needs to be different. And those economies are exciting to me because they're actually heavily investing in Web3, future technology, future skills for young people. So I think that, Sub-Saharan Africa, those places are so alive to the extent and scale of the problem, that's kind of the biggest change that I've seen, certainly in the last couple of decades. It's almost like there's got something now has to be done because everything that currently exists is just simply not delivering the skilled workforces that are needed fast enough. And I think particularly with COVID again, as with all of these awful things that happen in life, it also accelerates a number of things. The idea that, I did an investment round, in 2021, all via Zoom, or Google Meet. I didn't meet a single investor in real life. I had some big companies that we partner with. They had to overnight deploy 1,600 people home to work remotely and at home. That would have taken years to get there with consultations, all the rest of it. So it really forced forward and accelerated the idea that it is possible to build remote teams. It is, not everybody has to sit in an office 9 to 5, 5 days a week. Some people enjoy it, that's fine. But it's kind of it's really just completely disrupted and dismantled everything that we thought we all knew about the way that we want to all live and work. And those are kind of like the two biggest sort of fundamental shifts that I've seen, which of course are hugely beneficial when you're thinking about how you can connect young people in one territory with jobs and employers in a completely different one. So that's kind of, those are the things that are helpful, helpful for what we're trying to do.
I feel like for those of us in the rabbit hole, this makes so much sense, and just hearing you talk about like the, problem at large and, sort of, connecting these two parties, and the solution that you're offering, it sounds like very practical and forward thinking. I can see how people on our side would think it's a cool idea. I could see how if I was a student and I'm getting like rewarded for learning like tangible things that are actually like useful, that would be like highly desirable. And so then on the flip side, I'm like, how to connect these dots? Like, is there like a lot of positive reception on the employer side of things, or is that like a significant challenge of this? Like, I would imagine, this is a bigger shift for them than it is for us, like us meaning people trying to get jobs in creative ways and everything. So like, what's that challenge like, and what's the reception been, and how do you sort of like, deal with the consumer education side on the employer side of things where, you got to sort of convince them that this is a better system?
Yeah, I think with time, all things are possible. What we're finding has surprised us. We were expecting quite a lot of resistance from the education side, particularly from kind of universities, higher education, and actually they're like, how do we partner with you? Because of course you would have to reskill 2-3 generations of teachers. Education just at a systemic level just cannot change fast enough. So they actually see us as an augmented service, an augmented bridge, that it can actively support better outcomes, for their students, and from a business perspective, they remain, competitive in what is a highly competitive academic marketplace. On the employer side, we have chosen to focus on developing partnerships with some very, very key strategics, so that we're building employer-led, kind of data-driven, market-driven employability courses that are basically verified by the people who are going to be hiring. At the other side, that's the fundamental shift that we're asking employers to do, is go, stop waiting for young people to finish education, fall into the hiring market, and then there's kind of this job board algorithmic frenzy that occurs, and then the churn and burn on the other side is crazy. It's sort of going, start to make better decisions, with more data points over a longer period of time. And as I say, it's not really anything different that I've been saying for, forever. The difference is all of these employers and their supply chains and their clients can't find the talent that they need. And that's the single biggest shift. We've had companies that we spoke to midway through last year. They were like, everybody loves us, everyone gets it, everyone thinks it's great. But it was like, it's kind of, we'll come back. They called us up, a couple of weeks ago going like, we're desperate, can you help us? And they're like, no. It's like, if you'd started with us, last year and gone through the process, you would now have a upskill talent pool, and you wouldn't be in a panic, So, I don't wish that on anyone, but it's kind of going, there are market forces that are giving us, a really, really good sort of wind in our sails. And I think the challenge for us now is going, we know the demand is there, we know the interest is there. How quickly can we build this? How rapidly can we scale it to meet the scale of the problem?
What is the, because, I have kids, right, who are going to end up in this, meat grinder of a job market at some point or another. And so I'm like, this is cool. I could see my son in particular, very methodical, loves working towards things, would get the reward system, cool. This is, awesome. So, but then, so I'm like, what is the long-term vision, scalability goal with this? Is it, I wouldn't even speculate, but yeah, just curious, in a perfect world, if this thing blows up, it's a really cool concept. You're solving a problem that's clearly a problem. What's the big vision?
I would like to have 1 billion learners on the platform by 2030. Because that's the number of...
That's a big vision.
that's a big vision.
I like it, though.
That's what I'm saying is, because it's necessary, not because it's a big number, because it's necessary. And I think I always look at, I didn't set out to be a startup founder. I find myself in a brave new world. I've dedicated my entire career to tackling this problem, and I want to find the most effective, scalable solution for that. So it's, and it's funny because, if you say, we said, well, we'd like to get to 10 million learners by 2025. And there was a VC in Mumbai, and they were like, is that all? Because of course it's like a suburb. There's always a scaling thing depending on where you go.
Perspective is everything. Fair enough.
But I think for me it's more about there's those big macro numbers, and that's fine. But I think that we will have to work really, really hard at a very, very local level. And I think our approach actually is as you would expect, a bit more decentralized in terms of we want to build, kind of hub and spoke communities. And we call them players, we call them learners players, so that you can have, Manchester players, Liverpool players, Leeds players, then you can go Austin players, New York players, Perth players, and start to build. What a lot of young people lack is alumni. They lack connection if they haven't gone through, if they don't come from a relatively privileged background, and kind of go into university and all that stuff. So we want to, that's where I see Web3, that kind of community-based, community-driven, really coming into its own, because it's actually not that hard to get to that number. if it's very, very focused and localized, you know, and you know, I wish I could take credit for that idea. It was actually the original Facebook model, wasn't it, before we went into, you know, kind of madness. You know, but that's sort of very, very localized, because then you have a depth and richness of engagement. And that's what matters to us, because if you get that right, the scaling piece is kind of the byproduct of that rather than the end in itself. And so that's that's why. And I think for me, you know, my son is 18 now, and I watched him go through the same education system that I went through. I watched him during COVID listening to the most boring lessons, you know, with no interaction, no engagement whatsoever. And then I would watch him come to life, leading his, you know, clan, you know, as I say, you know, building, you know, servers in Minecraft. And I don't come from that world, but I have watched an 11-year-old, you know, all the way through his journey. And it's kind of going, same thing. He would never write any of that on his CV. And yet I have seen him demonstrate leadership qualities that would be invaluable to most businesses. So that's, you know, that's the kind of, you know, so we start with one, you know, and then we start with, you know, and then we go to 100, and then it's 10,000, you know, and then it's 1 million, and then it's 1 billion. And that's how I see us scaling, because it's necessary. Because honestly, in so many parts of the world right now, if you're a young person, like, you're having quite a miserable time, and it just doesn't have to be that way. And I think that's what drives me, and that's why I love this space, because it's just so much more. I think it's just so much more youth friendly in so many ways, and the ability for us to be able to get substantial numbers of young people into the space, you know, creating it, building it, making it, owning it. I mean, honestly, I mean, for me, that's just a huge privilege.
I love that. And I think, like, the resume of the future is going to look so dramatically different, but you're already seeing examples where the resumes of folks have already changed, but those people don't really use resumes anymore, so they're sort of invisible. The biggest example, I think, is like probably Vitalik Buterin, right? If you look at his resume pre Ethereum, it's like doing like Spot magazine article submissions for BTC magazine and going on raids in World of Warcraft, right? Like, that was the dude's resume. And you can see in retrospect how formative those experiences were to what he's doing now. And the same thing, like, for folks that are going to be leading or managing or having some sort of influence on the community layer of these projects, it's going to be the same thing. No, I just wanted to keep pulling on that thread of community. Honestly, I feel like in the new jobs of the future, that community layer is the single most important layer for all projects that are operating, especially in this, whether you call it Web3 or crypto or decentralized or however you want to frame it, space. The community layer is really paramount. It is everything. We honestly cannot overstate it enough, even though the term community has become so overplayed. And I feel like most projects, when they say community, it's super hollow for the most part, especially from more traditional companies that are using the word. So I'm just curious, from your perspective, like, first of all, how do you think about community, and how are you thinking about community in relation to Hundo? Because I feel like you got to dog food community the right way in order to instruct the community leaders of the future.
I think you're absolutely right. It's such an overused word. I guess for me, I've always sort of said, like, your vibe attracts your tribe. So I think of community more in sort of tribes. And I think they have to be grown organically, and they can't, and you can't really control, you know, they can't be controlled. You know, it's sort of going, if we have, you know, as I said earlier, our plan is to be powered ultimately, you know, by young people, you know, by the people who serve. So we made a commitment to have at least 50% of our own team as Gen Z, and it's incredibly powerful. And of course we would do that, because you can't authentically go and talk to a community of employers about the importance of hiring a diverse, you know, young talent pool, and then they look at your own business and, you know, you're not living that. And what we found is, by even within just building Hundo in that way, the community starts to make itself known. So the more diverse a workforce you have, the more that breeds diversity, because you get in all its forms. So I think for us, we will start with, I guess we're informed by young people. I feel like I'm waffling here, but we built the whole of Hundo. We kind of sat with about 200 gaming students, and kind of built it with them. They're one of our communities now. And that's why that's kind of where we see if we basically upskill and train community leaders, how to lead a local community in their city, town, village, then they start to. For me, that feels like the most decentralized thing we can do. We're upskilling local young people who will bring their friends, family, associates, colleagues, whatever, into their own ecosystem. And I think each one, what I'm quite excited to see, when we really start to ramp this up next year, I think they'll look really, really different. And I'm quite excited to see, what the sort of the Glasgow players look like compared to the South London players or whatever, and I think we'll get a real richness. I think the challenge for me is how do we then connect? How do we connect them all together so that they're all kind of like supporting each other? So I think, organic local growth, community growth, and actually just having people on the ground. That's the best way. That's the best way that we found it working. We experimented with like paid, media, some paid adverts on Instagram and TikTok and that, and it just completely bombed, which was a good thing. We'd spent a few $100 on it. It was an experiment. Where we get the most value is humans talking to humans, in their town, in their village, in their college, in their university, in their school, in their youth offending unit, in the care home that they're in. That's so I see very powerful communities that can be built when they are given support, expertise, and knowledge, and then kind of allow, and then allowed to sort of build and develop it in their own way. So that's I think that's the most exciting bit that I'm looking forward to next year, is to really see what actually happens when you start activating some real communities. And I think it's really important that people don't see Web3 as, it's like one or, it's all tech and no human, sort of analog contact. It's like, it doesn't have to be one or the other. I think it's very important that the kind of physical and digital worlds start to actually mesh together in a much more, personal, human-centric, human-centered, community-driven way. And I think we'll just end up with some really cool Hundo tribes all over the place. That's what I hope for.
I feel like you're preaching to the choir, like I think I said before, and I feel like our audience as well, like they're in the rabbit hole with us, and they I think will intuitively understand your project, understand why its importance and relevance, in the big picture, grand scheme of things. So, and for people like that and myself, I'm like, this is cool. Like, I get it. This is like a great like application of Web3 that like does something tangible, like in people's lives. Is there a way for, people on any end of the spectrum, like, student end, connection end, employer end, is there a way for people to get involved at this point? Or is there going to be like a public, call to action at some point? I would just imagine a lot of people thinking like, this is cool. How do I, lend a hand, do something, contribute in like some capacity?
Yeah, so we basically are launching, obviously we're already in existence, but we decided to go for kind of like, big launch on the 9th and 10th of November. And that's CareerCon. So that's the, discover the future of work. Because, exactly like you said, we're all in the rabbit hole and all the rest of it. Ultimately, most people we talk to, they're like, I want a job, I need some paid work so that I can pay my rent, so there's like a reality check, all of this stuff. To get involved, a number of ways, we obviously just get in touch with us. But, CareerCon is that kind of moment in time where it's going like, parents, educators, employers, people in Web3, people who don't know what it is, people who think it's all a load of rubbish, like everybody is to come, and discover actually what's happening and what's really important. So we're happy the way that, obviously employers we're happy to talk to in terms of building courses, modules and developing that. Educators, obviously, they're working in partnership with us already to bring their young people to CareerCon, to Hundo. And for individuals, we're always interested in conversations with experts, people who are actually building, creating, doing things. That's kind of the basis of all of our masterclasses. They're done, they're produced and delivered by people who are actually doing stuff, in the space. And then obviously, for individuals, we'll be launching a mentoring, support program. So there are a multitude of ways that people can get involved, and the best thing to do is to reach out to us and the team.
Awesome. Esther, really, really appreciate, your high level view of, both sort of like the lay of the land in this like situation, but also Hundo overall. I know you said you have listened to a couple of our episodes before. If you made it to the end, like sort of as we're winding up, we love to sort of peek into people's crypto wallets and legitimately out of interest, just love to see like what other projects or NFTs people are interested in collecting or participating in or whatever. So is there stuff out there that's totally unrelated to what you're currently working on that it's in the space that you're just either like a fan of or nerding out on or, anything like that?
Yes, yeah, I knew you'd ask me this. So my favourite rabbit hole is a genuine rabbit hole. I'm a Fluff World, Non-Fungible Labs. I absolutely adore some of my favourite people in the space at the moment. But the thing that I'm particularly fascinated by is Altered States Machine. Sorry, and they are looking at basically how you can imbue your PFPs, avatars, NFTs with AI, ML transactional permissions, and I to go out and kind of conduct business in the metaverse on your behalf while you're asleep, doing all this stuff, and I'm like, those are the things for me that are just like, this is how quantum we're ever going to get as humans, I think, in my lifetime, and I'm like, and I just love it because I'm like, we could be so much more if we weren't all stuck to our emails and phones and Slack channels. If we could just send our digital twins out into the world doing stuff for us.
I'm with it.
Yeah. Fluff World that's such a weird project that's doing such technically ambitious things. Yeah. The way I think about it, to like very, very legit projects. It's super cool to hear. Just to echo what Rizzle was saying, it's been an absolute pleasure having you jump on, educate us about how Hundo will begin to educate the future leaders of the Web3 and crypto space. Really, really excited for this. I mean, if there's any way that we can help, especially when the project goes live in November, would love to, because it really is going to be the beating heart of the space, like how quickly we can onboard the new leaders, the new lifeblood.
It's been a total pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Cool. Thank you so much, Esther.
Wait. Make sure, Esther, before you go, anything anyone needs to know about where to find like more information, let's like link drop and, tell people any important dates or whatever they need to know at the end here.
Yeah. So you can come to Hundo.xyz, register for CareerCon and come and get involved and see what we're all about on the 9th and 10th of November.
Awesome. That was easy and very straightforward.
Anyone would think I'd done it before, huh?
Yes. But Esther, yes, co-signing on exactly what Matt said. It's been a pleasure, and absolutely, if there's some role that we can play in any of our various channels, podcasts included, would love to support and be a part of this moving forward. So please keep us in mind as well.
I will. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, am I safe to leave?
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to this week's episode. Just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Proof of Beauty. Proof of Beauty is an experimental digital experience studio. The blockchain is their canvas and the tokens are their brush. You can learn more about Proof of Beauty by checking out pob.studio. You can follow them on Twitter as well at PRRF Beauty. That's PRRF Beauty on Twitter and pob.studio on their homepage to learn more about their projects like Hash, London, and Publico. Thank you, and see you in the next episode.